There's a moment, quiet, disorienting, when a man wakes from the arms of pleasure and realizes he feels nothing. Or worse, emptier than before. The bed still warm, the scent of connection still in the air. But inside, a silence. Just the slow, sinking realization that what he thought would fill him only drained him more. He remembers her laugh, her breath, the curve of her neck, the way she touched him. But underneath it all was a performance, his one more attempt to feel worthy, one more ritual masked as passion. And it didn't work. Carl Jung once whispered a terrifying truth from the shadows of the psyche. Desire is not what you think it is. This isn't a story about lust. It's a confession about what lies beneath it. Validation mistaken for love. Performance for presence. Sex for self-worth. We've been trained to chase bodies, but no one told us why. No one showed us the mirror. And now, men walk through life starving for something they can't name. They seek in others what was lost in themselves. The result? A generation exhausted not from sin, but from trying to feel whole through touch that never goes deep enough. So we must ask, what if the body you chase is only a doorway back to the child you abandoned? There's a truth that most men carry in silence. A truth that doesn't show up in the performance, in the breathless moments, or even in the whispered promises of the night. It appears after, in the quiet, in the stillness after skin has touched skin and the room begins to cool. It's the moment he realizes he doesn't feel full. He feels emptier because what he offered wasn't just his body. It wasn't just desire. It was something he never meant to give away. Something he didn't know he was giving. He offered his hunger, not the hunger for sex, the hunger to be chosen, to be seen, to be touched in a way that says, you matter, you're enough, you don't have to perform anymore. But no one told him that's what he was chasing. So he chased the body. He chased pleasure. He chased dominance, technique, approval. He chased women like prizes, believing if he won enough, something inside would finally quiet down. But it never did, because sex without consciousness doesn't fill the void. It only makes it louder. Carl Jung understood this. To him, every sexual act was a ritual, not of lust, but of longing. A ritual where the unconscious makes itself known, not in words, but in impulses, in behaviors, in choices that make no sense to the conscious mind, but perfect sense to the shadow. You think you're chasing beauty? You're chasing your mother's approval. You think you're seeking thrill? You're trying to silence the child inside. And the tragedy? That truth is buried under layers of performance. Men think they're being powerful when they give good sex, when they control the rhythm, when they dominate the room. But most of them aren't making love. They're auditioning, trying to earn what should have been given freely, acceptance. And in that performance, they forget themselves. The man who kneels between a woman's legs with devotion, with reverence, believes he's showing care. But often, he's offering himself like a sacrifice, hoping that if he gives enough pleasure, he'll be spared the pain of being rejected again. Because every man who didn't feel loved as a boy learns to earn it. And sex becomes the stage. But the soul cannot be tricked. It knows when you're not being real. It knows when you're chasing connection, but performing like a salesman. And that's why even the best night, the most intense orgasm, can leave a man feeling hollow. Because it wasn't intimacy, it was negotiation. And your soul doesn't want a deal. It wants home. Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is what happens when men don't see what they're really offering in sex. They believe they're choosing, but really, they're bleeding their energy into the bodies of women who were never meant to carry it, bleeding their hope into nights that were never meant to heal. And each time, they wake up with a little less of themselves, wondering why they can't feel whole. Because sex was never about the body. It was always the soul asking, can you see me? And that's what makes this truth so terrifying. Because to see yourself, really see, is to admit how many times you gave yourself away, not for love, but to avoid feeling unlovable. But that admission is where the healing begins. Because until a man realizes what he's truly giving in sex, he'll never understand what he's truly worth. And if he doesn't know his worth, every woman becomes a mirror of the worth he's still begging to find. This chapter ends with a brutal but liberating question. When you enter someone, do you do it to connect or to prove you deserve to be kept? Because the difference is the difference between sex that drains you and sex that brings you back home. There's a scene that plays out in almost every man's life but no one talks about it. The moment when desire doesn't come from the body, it comes from the wound. The man believes he's chasing sex, but what he's really chasing is a ghost. A father who never looked him in the eyes and said, "I'm proud of you." A mother who loved him, but only when he behaved, pleased, performed. A culture that told him his value lives in conquest, in being wanted and being chosen. So he becomes that man, the one who enters the world with hunger masked as charm, with absence masked as dominance. The pursuit begins, but it's not pursuit. It's a cry, because somewhere along the line, a boy learned that being himself wasn't enough. So he shape-shifted. He learned to be agreeable, smooth, pleasing, kind, always available, always trying. But this isn't masculinity. This isn't confidence. It's survival, the quiet desperation to finally feel chosen, even if only for a night. And here's the illusion. Society claps for it. They say, he's a gentleman. He treats women well. He's romantic. He gives everything. But that everything is hollow, because he's not giving from fullness. He's giving from famine. He's feeding her the last of what he has, hoping she'll give him back what he lost long ago. It looks like love. It's begging. Jung warned us. What you do not make conscious will appear in your life as fate. And fate becomes a cycle. Over and over, this man is drawn to women who echo his unhealed story. The emotionally unavailable, the unpredictable, the ones who validate him and withhold it in the same breath. Why? Because the wound seeks itself. Until it's healed, it repeats. And that's why sex, for many men, becomes compulsive. Not because of addiction, but because of inherited emptiness. He doesn't even know what he's trying to fill. He just knows he needs it. He needs to be touched, to be wanted, to be affirmed by a woman's moan, a woman's eyes, a woman's breathless approval. But each time, he walks away emptier, because no amount of external acceptance can fix an internal abandonment. It's ancestral. The male lineage is filled with this silence. Men who are never held, never heard, never allowed to cry without shame. And when that pain is left untouched, it transforms into performative masculinity, into aggression, into seduction, into obsession with being seen as strong, capable, desired. And here's the paradox. The more the man tries to prove he's enough, the more he affirms that he doesn't believe it. This is how lust becomes the mask, but underneath it is grief. This is why the man feels tired after sex, why he loses his edge, why something feels missing, even if the night was perfect, because the body performed, but the soul was ignored. Every man must ask, is your desire rooted in connection or in compensation? Because the truth is, many men confuse being wanted with being loved. They chase the woman who looks like salvation, not because she is, but because she mirrors the mother he's still emotionally bargaining with. And that bargaining, it destroys him. He becomes emotionally malleable, excessively kind, overgiving, suffocatingly nice. But niceness isn't love. It's the inner child pleading, if I'm good enough, you'll never leave. This isn't romance. This is reenactment. The woman doesn't even know she's being handed that emotional job. She just sees a man who's too available, too sacrificing, too lost in her, and eventually she walks. Because deep down, no one wants to carry someone else's self-worth. And he's left where he began, alone, confused, wounded. But here's the gift hidden in that collapse: awareness. The moment he stops blaming the women and starts seeing the story. Because when you see the pattern, you can break it. But if you don't, you'll keep mistaking the body you want for the love you never had. He touches her, not roughly, not with dominance, but gently. And that's when the panic sets in. Not because he's afraid of her, but because for the first time, someone might actually see him. Beneath the flirtation, the charm, the well-practiced rhythm of pleasure, something trembles. Because this isn't performance anymore. It's presence. And real intimacy, it doesn't arouse the ego. It disarms it. The strong man becomes the soft boy. The confident gaze flickers with uncertainty. Because when a woman meets you with presence, not approval, it forces you to look at the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime hiding. A single touch awakens 1,000 memories. The mother who wasn't warm, the father who never came home, the praise that never arrived, the quiet rooms where the boy sat alone, wondering if he mattered. That's what intimacy brings back. Not just closeness, but exposure, because the body becomes a stage and the soul begins to scream. Jung understood this long before neuroscience caught up. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. So many men confuse that scream for weakness. They say, I don't know why I pulled away. I thought I liked her, but suddenly I felt trapped. They say she was too much, but she wasn't. She was just real. And real is terrifying when your identity is built on masks. Because true intimacy doesn't inflate the ego. It melts it. And that melting feels like death if the ego is all you've ever known. So what does the man do? He runs. He blames. He picks fights. He disappears. Not because he's heartless, but because he's collapsing inside and doesn't have the tools to stay present in his own unraveling. Because presence feels like pressure when you were raised to suppress. When no one taught you that vulnerability is strength, not exposure. This is why sex, for many men, becomes a battlefield of confusion. They're told to pursue, to conquer, to perform, but no one teaches them what to do when their soul is seen. So they confuse emotional overwhelm for being too much. They misinterpret softness as danger, and they mistake being held as being trapped, because real intimacy strips away everything they use to feel safe, control, distance, noise, performance, and suddenly it's just them, naked, not in flesh, but in psyche. And that's more terrifying than any physical vulnerability. This is why many men crave women who don't truly see them. Because shallow sex is safe. You can dominate it, manage it, forget it. But intimacy, that lives in the body. It echoes after the orgasm. It breathes in silence. It lingers. And it reminds you of who you are when the lights are off and the applause stops. So they run to the next distraction. Another conquest, another stage, another mask. But the shadow doesn't vanish. It waits. It follows. And every time intimacy knocks again, it speaks louder. Because the soul doesn't want more sex. It wants truth. And that truth will keep repeating itself, relationship after relationship, until the man finally stops running. Until he stands in that moment of emotional terror and chooses not to flinch. That's the real act of masculine courage. Not dominance, not seduction, but stillness in the face of your own unraveling. Only then does intimacy stop being a trigger and become a mirror, not of the man you pretend to be, but the man you truly are. He thinks he loves her. He says it with conviction, maybe even with tears, but deep beneath the surface, he doesn't see her. He sees a mirror, a reflection of everything he's been craving. Not a woman, but a rescuer, a redeemer, a replacement for the affection he never received. She smiles, and he feels worthy. She withdraws, and he crumbles. Because what he's chasing isn't connection, it's correction. He's not saying, I choose you. He's saying, please heal what I never faced. This is projection, and most men mistake it for love. They pedestal her, not because they respect her, but because they need her to reflect back a version of themselves they can't hold alone. She becomes the mother he never had, the mirror that affirms his masculinity, the fantasy that makes his emptiness disappear. But here's the problem. No one can play that role for long. Eventually, she falters. She says the wrong thing. She doesn't respond the way he hoped. She pulls back, not out of cruelty, but because she's human. And in that moment, the pedestal collapses, and love, it curdles into contempt. He begins to resent her for failing to be the ideal he forced upon her. He says she's changed, but the truth? She just became real, and he didn't know how to love real. He only knew how to consume. Carl Jung warned us about this long ago. He spoke of the anima, the feminine within the man. He said, when the inner feminine is not made conscious, it is projected outward, and the man chases what he refuses to meet within. So what happens? He meets women he swears are different, yet the pattern repeats. He says, she betrayed me. She wasn't what I thought. But that's the point. She was never what he thought. She was what he needed her to be until she wasn't. And that shift breaks something. Because the pedestal wasn't love. It was survival. It was the child inside him, begging to finally feel chosen. And when that illusion breaks, so does he. Not loudly, quietly, withdrawing, blaming, detaching. And the woman is left wondering, where did he go? But the truth is, he was never really there. Only his projection was. And now, the projection is gone. Here lies the most brutal truth. When you use someone to fix you, you don't love them. You consume them. You drain them, try to repair something they didn't break. And the tragedy? You often leave them emptier than you found them. Because being placed on a pedestal isn't a compliment. It's a trap. She's not adored. she's imprisoned, expected to maintain a fantasy. And when she fails, she becomes the villain in his collapse. This is how intimacy becomes inversion, where the man starts by offering love, but ends by withdrawing everything just to avoid seeing what he never wanted to face inside himself. So what's the way out? Jung's answer was simple, but not easy. You confront your own anima. You make the inner feminine conscious, the softness, the yearning, the fear, the vulnerability. You stop projecting and you start integrating, because only then can you meet a woman as she is, not as a savior, not as a stand-in, not as a mirror for your wound, but as a human. And in that space, love finally begins, not as performance, but as presence. You think it was just sex, just a night, just a moment, just a body, but then something shifts. You walk away slower. Your mind feels foggy, your chest heavier, and you can't explain it, because what you lost wasn't visible. It was energetic. Not all bodies are safe to enter. Not all intimacy is sacred, because sex is not just physical friction. It's an exchange, a merging, a ritual. And if you enter unconscious, unguarded, unaware, you don't leave untouched. You leave altered. Her unresolved trauma becomes your confusion. Her emotional chaos becomes your disorientation. Her void becomes your fatigue. You were clear before. Now you're cloudy. You were calm. Now you're restless. And you can't trace it because the damage wasn't loud. It was quiet, invisible, but devastating. Because what she carries doesn't stay with her. It enters you. Not with violence, but with open arms. Because sex is a portal, a doorway. And every doorway leads somewhere. The question is, do you know where hers leads? Does she? Carl Jung believed the unconscious always seeks integration. And in intimacy, the unconscious screams. But if you're not listening, you mistake energy for arousal. You mistake spiritual chaos for pleasure. And by the time you wake up, you've given away parts of yourself you can't even name. That ache you feel isn't guilt. It's dissonance. The friction between who you were and what you absorbed. We don't talk about this. We glorify conquest. We celebrate body count, but never ask at what cost. Because sex done unconsciously is not connection. It's erosion. It doesn't fill you. It fragments you. You give your body for a moment, and your clarity for days. Jung warned, the psyche knows nothing of chance. What appears to be accident is often fate in disguise. So who you choose matters. Not just emotionally, but energetically. Because when you open yourself to someone, you're not just touching flesh. You're touching memory, patterns, agreements, spiritual weight, her addictions, her past lovers, her beliefs about men, her fear of herself. If she hasn't made peace with them, they don't stay dormant. They enter you, and suddenly, you carry what you never chose. That's why discernment isn't judgment. It's armor. It's the masculine shield in a world that teaches you to surrender without thinking, to chase chemistry without context, to call it power when you're actually being emptied. But you feel it, don't you? You felt it the morning after. The stillness that wasn't peace. The exhaustion that wasn't from exertion. You felt it when her chaos clung to your soul like smoke. So here's the brutal truth. Sex is never just sex. It's never just about the body. It's a handshake between spirits. And some hands, they don't let go. So from this point on, remember, what you enter enters you. And not every invitation deserves a yes. He was told how to win her. Be confident, be strong, be skilled. He learned to perform perfectly. The stroke, the rhythm, the words, the timing. Technique became his armor. Pleasure became his proof. But deep down, something never felt real. Because what he offered wasn't intimacy. It was choreography. He wasn't being himself. He was being what he thought she wanted. What the world told him he had to be. And in that performance, something sacred died. Because performance doesn't create connection. It creates distance. Carl Jung once said, only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. And the paradox is this. Real intimacy doesn't want your perfection. It wants your presence. It wants you without the act, without the mask, without the tension of proving. Because sex is not where a man shows he is powerful. It's where he discovers he is human, soft, raw, aware. And that realization, that's the collapse of the performer. It's terrifying, but it's the only doorway to depth. He realizes that giving sacred pleasure isn't about domination. It's about surrender, not to the other, but to the truth inside himself, to the softness he buried, to the tenderness he feared, to the longing he never voiced. Jung called it the integration of opposites. To become whole, a man must touch his feminine, not abandon his strength, but balance it. And in that balance, pleasure becomes something else entirely. No longer a goal and no longer a conquest, but a ritual, a presence, a return. In that return, he feels something strange, emotion rising during sex. Not lust, grief, gratitude, silence. It catches him off guard because it's not about how she feels anymore. It's about how he finally allows himself to feel. No pressure, no timeline, just breath and being. He starts to understand touch can be healing, stillness can be erotic, and surrender is not weakness. It's truth. Because when a man opens not just his body, but his soul, the act becomes something sacred. The bedroom becomes a temple. The moment becomes eternity. But this awakening is not easy. The performer resists. The ego protests. You'll look weak. You'll lose control. You won't be enough. But he stays. And in that staying, something dissolves. Not his power, his prison. Because the role he played to be accepted was never love. It was survival. And now, he doesn't want to survive intimacy. He wants to live in it, breathe in it, break open inside of it. And from that collapse, he rises whole. Jung would call this individuation the integration of the full self. Not just the masculine mask, but the full emotional, nuanced reality of who he is. In this space, sex stops being a transaction. It becomes transmission. It becomes the place where nothing needs to be said because everything is felt. The performance dies, and presence is born. And in that sacred moment, something wild happens. He stops trying to impress her and starts revealing himself. And that's when intimacy begins. There comes a moment when a mirror cracks, when a man finally looks at his reflection, not to fix his image, but to meet the part of himself he kept abandoning. No more chasing, no more bending, no more silent prayers disguised as kindness. The loop of proving ends where presence begins, because he realizes the love he craved could never be given by someone else. It had to be chosen by him. For him, the boy who begged to be picked becomes the man who picks himself, not in arrogance, but in clarity. And this is where the shift happens. Desire stops being a plea. It becomes an invitation. It's no longer, please love me, please see me. It's now, I know who I am. If you can meet me here, welcome. That frequency is rare and powerful because nothing is more attractive than a man who no longer performs. A man whose silence feels like certainty, whose yes is clean, whose no doesn't need to be explained. This is the awakened masculine, not the loud one, the steady one, not the one trying to be chosen, the one who already chose himself. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." This is not a quote. It is a map. Because the man who looks within will always find his way home, no matter how lost he once felt in love. And when that man touches another, it's different. His desire is not hungry. It's grounded. His pleasure is not performance. It's presence. He no longer opens his body to prove his worth. He opens it when it feels right, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. Not all women are worthy of that door. Because sex is no longer about escape. It's about expansion. And for the first time, he holds his energy like a sacred flame, not something to be shared recklessly, but something to be honored, to be trusted to be protected. Because he knows now, his body is not just skin, it's memory. His desire is not just heat, it's depth. And whoever walks into that space, unready, will walk out with nothing. Because he will not shape-shift anymore. He will not shrink for love. He will not confuse intensity for connection. The soulful masculine is not here to beg. He is here to build, to meet, to invite, but never to chase. He understands now that love without self is abandonment. That sex without clarity is drainage. That validation without inner worth is a trap. So he rewrites the narrative, not by shouting, not by proving, but by living differently, still, present, aware. He chooses silence over noise, discernment over desire, connection over chaos. Because he knows you do not become a man when you conquer others. You become a man when you stop needing to. He remembers his softness, but no longer hides it. He honors his shadow, but no longer lets it lead. He welcomes intimacy, but only when it reflects the truth he now carries within. And from this new place, desire becomes sacred again. No longer a transaction, but a truth. No longer a performance, but a ritual. This is the soulful masculine awakening. Not loud, but unshakable. Not demanding, but undeniable. Not empty, but whole. And in that wholeness, he doesn't ask for love. He becomes it. And that changes everything. This week, Say no to the craving that empties you. Say yes to the silence that rebuilds you. Don't chase connection. Cultivate it inside. If this video cracked open something you were too afraid to name, drop the line that hit your soul in the comments. And share it, not for views, but for the men still starving for something they can't explain. Because if Jung was right, and the unconscious drives everything, then maybe the most important desire is the one you finally bring into the light. Don't scroll past this moment. Let it change you.